autofocus lenses are supported, but this camera is really designed for manual focus. That's likely as most cinematographers prefer. On the camera's LCD, there's an expanded view to punch in for accurate focus, although the big screen is a help. Double tap to zoom, then pinch to zoom further. Peaking is also supported any color as long as it's red, 3 intensity levels. The autofocus key does a one-time focus on the center of the image. Tap the screen to select another focus point. Double tap returns to center. Among the right side connectors are a 3.5mm mic in, headphone out, and a mini XLR input. Internal and external mics can be independently selected to left and right channels and can be set to either mic or line level. An adapter, available as an optional accessory from Blackmagic, is needed to connect standard XLR cables, which enables me to connect my Sony ECM77 directly to the camera. I like that. The screen can select internal mics, XLR at either line or mic level, as well as 3.5 at line and mic. Left and right channels are configured independently. For phantom power, the second panel can turn it on. Once you're configured, the camera can save settings as a preset. These can be named and stored for later reuse. They can also be updated. The import and export feature enables sharing between multiple cameras on a shoot. Got so excited to start shooting, we never went over the button switches and ports on the outside. There is nothing small or pocket about this unit. It weighs about 900 grams, and the design reminds me of a stills camera more than a video or cinema device. A nice big grip on the right side, and there's a large lens turret with cooling vents both above and below. The LCD screen resolution is 1920 by 1080, and even at the high brightness setting, it washes out easily in sunlight. Now, it's also fixed, which means tilting it up or down for better visibility isn't an option. There's a record button on top, on the front, another on the LCD screen. There's also a button to capture a single uncompressed DNG frame as a still. If you've turned the clean feed on for the LCD, there are shortcut keys to set ISO, shutter, and white balance on top, off-speed frame rate, labeled HFR, and focus punch-in on the back. 3 function keys on top toggle false color, display LUT, and frame guide by default, but can be reassigned in the menu to other functions, like clean feed. You can set whether the key affects the display on the LCD or on the HDMI feed. Keys can also be configured to activate presets for the 5 options in the middle row, along with the specific setting. So when ISO and 400 are selected, pressing the key resets the ISO to that. That really feels like a power feature. There are 3 port doors on the left. I found them awkward and in the way when open. In addition to audio, there's a full-sized HDMI connector and a 12-volt connector, which powers the camera and charges the battery. And USB-C to record on external SSD drives. The SD and CFast slots are on the right. There's a centered tripod socket on the bottom, nicely distant from the battery door. Another 1/4-inch socket on top for mics and other accessories, but Blackmagic warns it's not designed to support the camera's weight. Now, neither the box nor the body divulges the country of manufacture. When I asked Blackmagic, they indicated that was confidential information, and they have factories in Indonesia, Singapore, and Australia. Why so secretive? Now, everything you've seen so far was recorded with dynamic range set to film. And for this green screen set, I've switched dynamic range to video. This is the DSC Labs Cameline chart. The manual says the video dynamic range setting is similar to Rec. 709, a specification designed for HD video with about 8 stops of range. I've exposed the chart so the chips are evenly defined. And you can see on the histogram that they're spread to the left and right. However, that only shows part of the picture. It's also valuable to have a look at the waveform. And from the camera, I'm referring to the waveform on an Adamus Ninja, but I'm showing you the waveform in DaVinci Resolve from the recording. Note that the scope here displays the 10-bit data range, so 1023 is 100%, 512 is 50. I exposed with aperture at f4.6, so the X looks straight. Mid-gray falls about 55, white is pretty close to 100. The technician in me is happy with that. And when I switch back to the film setting, the histogram now has lots of room to the left and the right, so you know there's more dynamic range available. Reflected light interiors and studio sets rarely exceed 8 stops. Well, the expanded range is also clear on the waveform, where there's clearly lots of headroom. On the Ninja, I could see that distorted the X slightly, so I closed the iris to f5.6. And note how granular the steps are on this camera. That's more control than you'll find elsewhere. And that straightens it up. The compromise setting, extended video, falls somewhere between. I found f5.4 provided the balance here. Checking the waveform for the chart, if film increased the range by nearly 50%, extended video provides about 25% more. If you are shooting for video, particularly interiors, the video setting will mean less post-work, and you're unlikely to lose anything. And green screen can be fussy, but creating a key from this scene was easy and required very little fiddling and tuning, and I was intentionally lax with lighting. There's only one light for me and the background. That feels like a good intro to lookup tables, and there's a menu tab dedicated to those. The camera provides 4 native settings, which manage the display both on the LCD and the HDMI output, enabling you to see approximately what the final image will look like after the LUT is applied and footage is graded in post. This is the default display for the film dynamic range. The film to video setting provides a more contrasty and saturated Rec. 709 image. More lookup tables can be imported from third-party sources, but they can also be created in Resolve or other software. Handy if you've created a custom grade for your production. Now, note that using these has no impact on internal recording, only the display, which means that they affect a recording you're making from the HDMI output. But wait, there is a setting to bake in the LUT if that helps speed your post-production workflow. One more note, when the camera is turned off, so is the display LUT setting. I had to reset it every time I powered up the camera. Now, Blackmagic did indicate that this was anomalous behavior. This camera has been criticized for a lack of in-body stabilization. And yeah, if you're shooting handheld, that feature might sometimes prove enough assistance to get a stable shot. This handheld shot was taken with a stabilized Canon L lens. But let's do a cinema reality check on stabilization. Once you've configured this camera for a shoot with cage, rails, external media, and batteries, follow focus system, you're at least using a shoulder mount or a gimbal stabilizing system. Now, I'm pretty sure that DPs and cinematographers from the Lumiere brothers and D.W. Griffith, all the way to Roger Deakins and David Mullen, never asked if a camera had stabilization, or autofocus for that matter. Here's the thing. What you can do is overshoot the scene and stabilize in post. In fact, this 6K camera is perfect for exactly that. Use the framing guidelines for, say, 80%, and use the overshoot area as your stabilizing buffer. Probably better results, like this shot that I stabilized in post. Incidentally, don't be misled by the menu's motion sensor calibration. That aligns the horizontal and vertical level. The shooting experience does not end with the camera. You'll want to edit. However, there's no way to import Blackmagic RAW files into Final Cut, which is my jam, so that proved to be an obstacle for me. Now, Blackmagic does provide an OS X RAW player, so these files can be played on a Mac. And of course, these files work with DaVinci Resolve, which Blackmagic provides for free. And even though I've spent some time with it, I did not have time to get myself proficient enough to produce this review. And as a result, the sections recorded with Blackmagic RAW were edited in Resolve and output to 4K 24-frame DCI before being integrated into a Final Cut project. Now, that will be easy if you purchase the camera, as the Cinema Camera 6K comes with a license for DaVinci Resolve Studio, the full version. That's essential, as Resolve, the free version, does not have the ability to output 4K DCI. The license for Studio, as I learned from my experience trying to get one, seems to be Blackmagic's most prized and valued asset. The reviewed unit did not come with the license, and when I asked, Blackmagic's agency said they would not provide one. After explaining and then pleading, still no. Their reaction made me feel as if I'd asked for a gold brick, tickets to Hamilton on Broadway, and an audience with Lorne Michaels to pitch my new series on photographers getting coffee. For me, no wasn't really an acceptable answer, as an HD resolution video about a 6K camera wouldn't make either of us look good. So I contacted my friends, one of whom knows the Canadian manager for Blackmagic. And after explaining the situation, they understood and empathized, but said they didn't have any licenses either. That conversation resulted in a call from the agency telling me again that I could not have a license. Acquiring a DaVinci Resolve license seems more complicated than mining Bitcoin. Well, I honestly don't know how they can sell it for just $300. More explaining, begging, and pleading, and a few hours later they finally agreed to send me a physical license device so that I could use Studio, but only for 2 weeks. And I had to promise to do a review of Studio, not a big deal, and they needed my credit card details. Apparently I'm not trustworthy. So I will show you Studio and what you can do with the Blackmagic RAW files from this camera in another video. The preview is that RAW recordings provide extraordinary control over exposure and color. So if you've shot with an ISO of 1000 or less, you can set any other ISO under 1000, shoot at 1250 or over, and again, any ISO in that range is available. Set any color temperature and grade using Resolve's deep and wide tool set for color grading. The menu is attractive, well-designed, and very responsive to touch. It feels logical and well-organized. Everything turned up where I expected. That said, the on-screen overlays are small and can get obscured by content. I'd appreciate an option to increase the size. Battery life is very limited. The specs promise 45 minutes of non-stop 6K RAW recording to a CFast card. Now, in practice, a fully charged battery lasted for 36 minutes just on standby. And there's no sleep mode, so I quickly got in the habit of turning it off when I wasn't recording. The power adapter both powers and charges, which helps for scenes where you're close to AC power. Blackmagic sells an optional battery grip, which replaces the internal battery with 2L batteries and promises 2 hours of non-stop recording. For serious use, you'll probably want an external V-mount battery kit with a DTAP adapter. An LPE6 battery and charging cable are included, as well as an activation key for DaVinci Resolve Studio, a step up from the free version. This video, recorded in September 2020, used software version 6.9.6. There were several times while I was working on this project that I considered abandoning it, uncompleted, and returning the camera. I'm not sure why the experience is so difficult, but the lack of compatibility with Final Cut, the limitations on internal ProRes recording, and on HDMI output leave me wondering why Blackmagic seems to be at odds with other manufacturers in this space. Are these technical or business issues? My budget for these videos is small and often exceeds my earnings. The investment in suitable media to make the raw recordings was difficult, and it was compounded by a very limited list of expensive and elusive products. This was my first experience borrowing a review unit from Blackmagic. They did themselves no favors by sending just the camera. For a good review experience, the review kit should include some recommended media, as well as the battery grip, along with the XLR adapter cable. Just saying. So this might easily be the last time that Blackmagic agrees to lend me a camera to review. And that feels like a negative note to end on, and it shouldn't be. This well-designed and engineered camera offers both quality images and operation equal to pro gear. I loved it in the studio connected to the ATEM Mini. Now, most of the hurdles involve getting started. Once you're up and rolling, you'll be rewarded with spectacular footage and extensive post-production flexibility. And best of all, it's relatively affordable. Just make sure it accommodates your needs and fits in your workflow. A new camera won't make you a better cinematographer, but practice can improve your skills. Keep creating until you run out of card space or battery power. If you post relevant questions or civil comments, I will read and reply. YouTube provides the ability to subscribe to my channel without cost or obligation. And that's a decision that I leave to you, but of course, you may already be a subscriber, in which case, thanks. Stay safe.